Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Room of Requirement. This is going to be the first video in a 10-part series that I am doing on Hermeticism. I'm going to be covering everything from the Corpus Hermeticum, Gnosis, Asclepius, the 8th and ninth, the Nag Hammadi Hermetica, the Emerald Tablet, Renaissance Hermetic Revival, and then ending with the Kabbalion. So this one is going to be Hermeticism Explained, from Hermes Trismegistus to High Magick. So let's dive in. Long before Hermeticism became associated with alchemy, astrology, and ceremonial magic, it began with a startling promise. The human being can know the divine because something of the divine exists within the human soul. The heavens, the forces of nature, and the depth of consciousness were understood as parts of one sacred reality. Humanity was not created merely to survive within the material world, but to awaken, to understand the order of creation, and to remember its spiritual origin. This teaching was placed in the mouth of a mysterious master named Hermes Trismegistus, the Thrice-Great Hermes. For centuries, philosophers, mystics, alchemists, astrologers, and magicians regarded him as the guardian of the primordial wisdom. His teachings would eventually pass through Egypt, Greece, the Islamic world, Renaissance Europe, Rosicrucianism, and the Western mystery schools. To understand Hermeticism is to therefore approach one of the deepest foundations beneath the Western esoteric tradition. Hermeticism is a philosophical, mystical, and esoteric tradition built around writings attributed to Hermes Trismegistus. These writings explore the nature of God, the creation of the cosmos, the divine origin of humanity, the problem of ignorance, spiritual rebirth, and the soul's return to its source. Hermeticism is not one rigid religion or single creed. The surviving texts were written by different authors and do not always agree on every philosophical detail. What unites them is a shared spiritual vision. The universe possesses sacred order. The human being contains a divine capacity for knowledge, and liberation comes through awakening rather than belief alone. Some scholars use the word Hermeticism specifically for the ancient Greco-Egyptian teachings and reserve Hermeticism specifically for ancient Greco-Egyptian teachings and reserve Hermeticism for the wider tradition that developed from them. In this series, Hermeticism will be used in the broader sense while keeping the ancient and later traditions clearly separated. The Hermetic writings emerged in Roman Egypt during a period of intense cultural exchange. Egyptian religion, Greek philosophy, astrology, temple traditions, Jewish thought, and other currents met within the same intellectual world. This did not produce a simple mixture in which every tradition became identical. It created a setting where old sacred ideas could be expressed in new philosophical language. Egyptian concepts of divine knowledge, priesthood, cosmic order, and spiritual transformation were interpreted through Greek forms of dialogue and philosophy. Hermeticism emerged from this encounter. Its writings often sound Greek in their philosophical vocabulary while preserving an unmistakably Egyptian atmosphere. Temples, divine powers, sacred speech, cosmic sympathy, and the belief that knowledge can transform the soul. Who was Hermes Trismegistus? Hermes Trismegistus was not the ordinary Hermes of Greek mythology, although the two are related. He was a legendary Greco-Egyptian sage, formed through the identification of the Greek Hermes and the Egyptian god Thoth. Hermes was associated with language, interpretation, movement, mediation, and the transmission of knowledge. Thoth was associated with writing, calculation, wisdom, sacred speech, and the moon, temple knowledge, and magic. Because these gods performed similar functions, they became closely identified in the Greco-Egyptian world. From this union emerged Hermes Trismegistus, whose title means Hermes the Thrice Great or Thrice Greatest Hermes. He was imagined as an ancient teacher who possessed knowledge of the divine, the heavens, nature, medicine, astrology, and the hidden sciences. The Hermetic writings were not composed by one historical man named Hermes. They were written by multiple authors who placed their teachings under his authority. Hermes functioned as the master of the tradition, the voice through which sacred knowledge is revealed to students such as Tot, Asclepius, and Ammon. Hermeticism is not based upon one single book. Its ancient literature is a collection commonly known as the Hermetica. The best-known collection is the Corpus Hermeticum, consisting of 17 Greek treatises preserved together in later manuscripts. These are usually written as dialogues in which Hermes instructs a disciple about God, mind, creation, and the soul, and also spiritual awakening. The Asclepius, also called the Perfect Discourse, survives primarily in Latin. It discusses humanity's place within creation, the sacred character of the cosmos, temple religion, spiritual images, and the relationship between divine and material existence. Other Hermetic materials survive through quotations, papyrus fragments, the writings of later authors, and texts found at Nag Hammadi. These include the Discourse on the Eighth and Ninth, a work describing spiritual instruction and visionary ascent. The Hermetica, therefore, represents a body of literature rather than one scripture. Later episodes in the series will explore its most important text separately. Scholars commonly divide Hermetic writings into two broad categories: the philosophical Hermetica and the technical Hermetica. The philosophical texts concern God, divine mind, creation, and human condition, spiritual rebirth, and the ascent of the soul. The Corpus Hermeticum and the Asclepius belong primarily to this category. The technical texts concern practical sciences attributed to Hermes: astrology, alchemy, medicine, divination, stones, plants, celestial influences, talismans, and natural magic. These writings contributed to Hermes' later reputation as the master of occult sciences. The two categories should not be treated as parts of one perfectly unified curriculum. They developed through different texts and environments. Yet together, they created the larger image of Hermes as both mystical teacher and guardian of practical sacred knowledge. At the center of the philosophical Hermetica is the reality of a supreme divine source. God is described through images such as mind, life, light, and the good, the one and the source from which all existence proceeds. This divine principle is not simply another being within the universe. It is the origin of being itself. The cosmos exists because divine intelligence gives it order, life, and intelligibility. Hermeticism therefore teaches that creation can be known because it proceeds from the mind. The patterns of nature, the movement of the heavens, and the structure of consciousness are not meaningless accidents. They reveal something of the intelligence from which they arise. This does not mean that ancient Hermeticism taught the simplified statement that everything is merely human thought. Its concept of divine mind is much greater than personal mentality. Nous, or the spiritual intelligence through which reality is known and through which the awakened soul recognizes its source. The Hermetic cosmos is alive. It is not an empty machine made from disconnected matter. It is an ordered whole animated by divine life. The stars, planets, elements, animals, plants, bodies, and souls participate in one interconnected creation. This idea later supported the Hermetic study of astrology, alchemy, and natural magic, because all levels of reality were believed to possess relationships with one another. The material world is therefore not entirely rejected. It can become a veil when humanity is consumed by appetite and ignorance, but it is also an expression of divine creativity. Nature becomes a sacred text whose forms reveal the processes of the greater cosmos. The Hermetic student learns to observe reality symbolically. The outer world and inner life reflect patterns that can be understood through disciplined contemplation. Hermeticism gives humanity a remarkable but demanding position. The human being belongs to both the spiritual and the material orders. And through the body, humanity participates in nature, change, desire, mortality, and fate. Through mind and soul, humanity possesses the capacity to know the divine. This makes the human being both vulnerable and extraordinary. Our suffering arises partly from forgetting our higher nature. Consciousness becomes absorbed in appearances, possessions, passions, and the temporary identity of the body. The soul mistakes its present condition for its complete identity. Hermetic awakening begins when the individual recognizes that the deepest part of the self does not belong entirely to the lower world. This recognition is not permission to despise physical life. It is a call to place the passions under the guidance of spiritual intelligence. The central human problem in Hermeticism is ignorance. This is not merely a lack of information. It is a state of spiritual forgetfulness in which the human being does not know God, the cosmos, or the true nature of the self. The remedy is gnosis, meaning direct spiritual knowledge. Gnosis is not blind belief or intellectual accumulation. It is a transformation of perception. The person no longer understands the divine only as an external concept, but recognizes divine reality through the awakened mind. This knowledge changes the individual. It brings humility because the personality is no longer mistaken for the center of existence. It brings responsibility because the awakened person understands themselves as a participant in the greater order. Hermeticism is therefore not satisfied with reading, discussion, or philosophical speculation. Its teachings are intended to produce a different quality of consciousness. Several Hermetic writings describe spiritual awakening as a form of rebirth. The ordinary personality has been shaped by fear, desire, anger, confusion, and attachment. Rebirth occurs when these forces lose their authority and divine qualities begin to govern the soul. This transformation is sometimes described through the imagery of the ascent. The soul rises beyond the planetary forces associated with the fate and returns toward the divine realm. This does not necessarily mean physically traveling into the heavens. It describes liberation from the unconscious powers that keep consciousness bound to its lower condition. The Hermetic ascent is therefore both cosmic and inward. The heavens provide the symbolic structure, but the transformation takes place within the human being. Later systems of alchemy and high magic would develop the same idea through different symbols: purification, initiation, planetary ascent, and regeneration of consciousness, and also the completion of the great work. The ancient Hermetic writings do not present one standardized ritual system. Their spiritual practice is expressed through contemplation, instruction, ethical purification, prayer, hymns, reverence, thanksgiving, and the cultivation of divine knowledge. The teacher does not simply give the student information. The student must become capable of receiving it, and this requires quieting the lower passions and learning to perceive beyond ordinary appearances. Praise and thanksgiving are especially important. Hermetic knowledge does not lead only to intellectual superiority. It produces wonder. To know creation more deeply is to recognize the divine within it, and that recognition naturally becomes reverence. The true Hermetic practitioner is therefore not defined by how many correspondences they have memorized. They are defined by the degree of which knowledge has changed the way they see, live, and understand themselves. Hermeticism is not identical to every form of Western occultism. It influenced alchemy, astrology, Rosicrucianism, ceremonial magic, Hermetic Kabbalah, but those later systems developed their own teachings and practices. It is also not simply the doctrine of the Kybalion. The Kybalion is a modern work published in the 20th century. Its 7 principles became enormously influential, but they are not a summary of the ancient Corpus Hermeticum. We will examine that distinction carefully at the end of the series. Hermeticism is not merely positive thinking, manifestation, or the belief that thought automatically creates every event. Its original teachings are more demanding. They concern the purification of consciousness, knowledge of God, liberation from ignorance, and the regeneration of the human soul. The Hermetic writings pass through many cultures and historical periods. Texts attributed to Hermes circulated in Greek, Latin, Coptic, Arabic, and other languages. Hermes became a philosopher, prophet, astrologer, alchemist, and master of sacred sciences. During the Renaissance, the translation of the Corpus Hermeticum helped inspire a major revival of ancient wisdom. Thinkers such as Marsilio Ficino and Giordano Bruno saw Hermes as a witness to an original divine philosophy. Although their historical assumptions about the age of the writings were later corrected, the revival profoundly shaped Western esotericism. Hermetic ideas entered alchemy, astrology, Rosicrucian thought, occult philosophy, and the modern mystery schools. The tradition changed as it traveled, but its central question remained. What is the source of consciousness? What is humanity's place within creation? Can the soul awaken from ignorance? And can knowledge become transformation? Hermeticism begins with a vision of humanity that is both humbling and magnificent. We are small within the immensity of creation, yet we possess the capacity to contemplate that immensity. We are shaped by nature and fate, yet something within us can awaken beyond unconscious compulsion. We are mortal, yet capable of knowing what the Hermetic masters called the divine mind. The teachings of Hermes do not promise that hidden knowledge will make us superior to the world. They demand that knowledge makes us more awake within it. Every star observed, every symbol contemplated, and every mystery studied must eventually lead back to the condition of the soul. Otherwise, knowledge remains another possession of the ego. The doorway into Hermeticism is therefore not opened by collecting secrets. It opens when the student becomes willing to be changed by what they learn. Hermes Trismegistus stands at that threshold, not merely as a figure from the distant past, but as the enduring voice of a question that still confronts every serious practitioner. If the light of the divine intelligence is present within the human mind, what must we become in order to recognize it? In the next video, we will open the central body of the Hermetic teaching itself, the Corpus Hermeticum. We will begin with the Poimandres, the vision of the divine mind, the creation of the cosmos, and the descent of the human soul into nature. This is where the Hermetic path moves from history into revelation, and where the teachings of Hermes begin to explain who we are, why we have forgotten, and how consciousness may return to its divine source. Okay, guys, so that's what I have for you for the beginning of the series. Like I said, at the end of the video there, we are going to be covering the Corpus Hermeticum next, then Gnosis, Rebirth, and the Sacred Ascent of the Soul. And then I have a lot more coming, so there's 10 videos altogether for this. So thank you guys for sticking around this long. I appreciate each and every one of you, and I will see you next time around. Bye.